In the northwest region of the Land of Shadow lies the ruins of Rahu, nestled closely to where the Old Palace is situated in the Lands Between. This place is flooded, overgrown, and split into two by a chasm. Sister ruins to those of Black Stone, the great guardian golems still protect these lands, as was their ancient and solemn duty. Within one of their great halls, flanked by hooded women of giant stature, is an illusory wall. Hidden behind it is the likeness of a woman that many in the Lands Between would recognize. A crown atop her head, its veil draped down to her shoulders, and the iconic braided hair of the Eternal Queen, Marika. Before they were shamans, the women of Rahu were all well versed in spiritual arts. Offered to this statue was a bond stone, a large burrow stone studded with a perfectly white gem, said to be the polished form of a special kind of crystal. Some claim that these are similar to crystal tears, that which slowly formed over the ages in spots where the Erdtree's bounty once fell to the ground. Others believe it to be that of glintstone crystal that has lost its bluish color. Whatever its design, it was a ritual implement made to control explosions of spiritual power. According to the records left by Horn-Sent scholars, academics who study the ancient ruins, the women of Rahu practiced techniques for working with sprites, a task which was once thought lost to antiquity. They would cultivate succulent plants that supped on night-tinged dew, called dew gems, in order to practice sprite medicines. Dew gems were not too dissimilar to the silver arcane dew-kissed herba that grew under the false night sky of the underground eternal cities. Both gave off a faint glow of starlight. The ancient shamans would also carve stones into an oval shape and mark it with ornate engravings. In the center of the stone, they would make a small nest-like hole. These would be made as homes for wayward sprites, and then the stones could be used in their rituals. To make it welcoming for a sprite, the shamans would add a beast horn suffused with spirituality. The crucible had a particularly strong influence on the beast of this realm, causing many to grow horns despite the characteristics of their species. Many shamans would beckon to these beasts with their gentle songs or a simple whistle. With the horn of a crucible-touched beast, they would combine it with a spirit calculus, one that would have a distinctive acrid odor, which some claim to be a sign of particular spiritual potency. This would lead to the creation of sprite stones, and with a gentle farewell, the sprite would float on towards those who would threaten the shamans. Then, after a short time, the sprite would fade away into glittering lights, causing a spiritual explosion on its passing. With the use of the bond stone, they could manipulate the moment that the sprite vanished. Bonds with sprites were made to be broken, after all. Of all the sprites the shamans communed with, the fire sprites were said to be the most boisterous in nature. They would also make pacts with the earth sprites for the creation of linchpin stones, spiritual anchors said to hold the ground in place and quell the fury of earthquakes. But when this one shattered, the surrounding town fell into the broken earth. One account claimed that the moon itself had come tumbling down. The settlement of Morth was a peaceful Horn-Sent town, able to boast great wealth and respect, large spiral towers, wonderfully ornate archways, and home for many of the upper echelons of the Horn-Sent. Even still, the old currency of gold-coated spiral horns could be found buried in the dirt. These were said to have been bestowed upon Horn-Sent inquisitors as an honor for their noble work. But Morth did not just produce inquisitors who punished the guilty. Many of these luxuries were afforded due to the sacred duty of the men of Morth, as the greater potentates of Bonny Village. For while their wives and children lived lives of relative ease, the men were partaking in their holy duty. With cleaver in hand and sacred masks adorned to their faces, the greater potentates would toil as they attempted to raise saints. They would attempt to invoke the divinity of the crucible. Their tireless work helped bring their people closer to the gods, to a heaven far away from the ground below. But when the twin moon night came, it was as if the heavens came crashing down. One after the other, she violently shook the earth with moonlight, and when the stone talisman shattered, the screams of women and children would disappear into the earth, along with the town of Morth. The men of Bonny Village would return, much like it had an eternity ago, to find nothing but rubble and silence. And the wheel of time keeps turning, just to come back round again. In a time long past, when the astrologers established themselves in the mountaintops that nearly touched the sky, two sisters would gaze up at the cosmos as they walked. They had always chased the stars together, with every step of their journey, like many sisters were wont to do. But then, they met the twin moons. They were overlapping, as though nestled against one another. The sister who met the full moon, enchanting and bewitching, would one day become a queen. For during the age of the Erdtree, when the light of the Golden Order bled into the night sky, and Carian astrology withered on the vine, she would descend from the mountaintops. She would be remembered by many as the prominent champion who charmed the Academy with her lunar magic, becoming its master. She would be remembered for how she led her loyal glintstone knights, made from many valiant men and trolls, whose swords were sworn to her, and established the House of Caria as royalty. And nestled close behind her would be her younger sister, who beheld a moon that was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery. She would be the sister remembered only by a few, but she would be remembered by one as her little dark moon. The Carians would take up residence in an old Sunrealm fort and make it their seat of power. Massive direwolves would roam their courtyards, for the wolf was the beast of the Carian royal covenant, a symbol of the moon's pride that none can forget, no matter what remote lands they may arrive in. Rumors would be spread about the Carians, that they were descendants of night folk, a people who were few in number and were said to have bled silver long ago. For during the invasion of Liurnia, some had claimed to see whips wielded by their warriors shoot out like spears to pierce their foes. Others claimed that the new queen had Albinorics in her employ, an absurd rumor to be sure. The Albinorics were life forms made by human hands. Thus, many believed that they lived impure lives, untouched by the Erdtree's grace. Some Albinorics had the ability to spew freezing breath, while others were said to have worn blue-silver metal that was born from the same mother as they were, protecting them from magic and frost. Their archers were in a class of their own, and their deadly long-range specialists struck fear into the hearts of men. Some had even claimed to seen them on the back of the Carians' direwolves, though men claimed to see strange things all of the time. But when an upstart house of no name, headed by a woman of no renown, began calling herself queen, became the ruler of Liurnia and its academy, that there was rumors being spread that her blood ran silver, and she fed men to wolves and trolls. The champions of the Erdtree would march. They were led by a then unknown hero, but whose imagery today would be recognized by all. At the head of a great golden host, he would announce for the Queen of the Full Moon to hear,
"The Erdtree governs all. The choice is thine. Become one with the Order, or divest thyself of it, to wallow at the fringes. A powerless upstart."
This marked the beginning of the First Liurnian War, and Radagon's glory burned as red as his hair. Though Rennala's knights numbered fewer than 20, their swords could serve as catalysts. One knight would be as his own phalanx, striking in waves of steel and sorcery, maintaining pressure on multiple foes. And with the might of Carian grandeur, the royal prestige of their house could be embodied into magical greatswords, cleaving knights atop their steeds into two. Their lunar power made them a match for the champions of gold in battle. 2 wars would be fought, but there'd be no victory for the golden, nor for the moon. No prize but atonement and the birth of a vow. The wars would only end with the theft of the queen's heart. With both the Erdtree and the Academy in view, the great houses of the capital and the moon would be joined by the matrimonial bond between red-haired Radagon and Rennala of the full moon. Radagon would then partake in an ancient ceremony, one older than either Erdtree or Caria. Under the veiled eyes of a Nox swordstress, he would kneel in the basin and cleanse himself with celestial dew, a hidden night tear from the eternal city. Once upon a time, The stars of the night sky guided fate, and this was a recollection of those times. Absolution was his. Any bond, no matter how strained, or even severed, would be put to rights in the sacred baptism of Noxian rebirth. And honoring long-standing tradition, the queen bestowed a moon greatsword upon her spouse. Rennala's sigil was a full moon, bright and glorious, and Radagon's sword was a beam of its light. It appeared that night and flame were together once again, as it had been on the mountaintops so long ago. But while the queen had her consort, the dark moon drifted away. No longer nestled up close to her elder sister, Rennala felt cold, dark, and alone. That was, until the flames of the crusade were lit, when the red-haired son of the Eternal Queen would march on the horn scent. The Carian princess would disavow her birthright and choose to stand at Mesmer's side instead. She would chase after her own champion, one with a fire inside, a fire he despised that burned as great as the hatred he had for himself and all around him. Rennala knew full well that not even the brilliance of the moon could grant him succor. But it did not matter, for he could be hers. Accompanying her would be the steadfast Carian knight, Moonlit, chamberlain to Rennala. She was a friend to the trolls, who served the royal family, and proudly wielded their weapons as she fought arm in arm with her gargantuan comrades. All of the knights and sorcerers who left their homelands to serve Rennala were unparalleled in their devotion to her.
By your leave, we will accompany you wherever your lunar vessel takes you,
A wayward Carian knight was claimed to have said, and although she renounced her lineage to chase after Mesmer, her sister would not forsake her. For Rennala, head of the royal family of Caria, was said to have given her sister a gift most precious. She would gift her a lock of her own lustrous black hair, to show her the love and devotion she had for her younger and darker sister, that no matter where she went, the full moon would always look after her little dark moon. Before long, she became known as the Sword of Mesmer, and here alone, were moon and fire ever together. And the wheel of time keeps turning, just to come back round again. Now there was only one princess, Ranni, daughter of Rennala. Rennala would find solace in something akin to a sister. She would find solace in Ranni. For when Ranni came of age, Rennala would lead her by the hand and introduce her to her new moon. What Ranni beheld was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery, and Rennala would have her little dark moon again, one she could nestle up close to once more. They were as three sisters, older and younger, mother and daughter. But one day, Ranni would wander too close to the woods, alone. There, she would encounter a practitioner of heretical sorcery. Her skin was cold, as if all of her blood was drained. She wore a hat, white and pointed with a tip, frigid and frozen through. She looked as if she was a blue-skinned, multi-armed caller of wraiths. Or maybe she was one of the long-lived warriors clad in biting, freezing winds. Or perhaps she was, as some have whispered in hushed tones, that she was neither flesh nor spirit, that her blood ran silver, that it made mockery of life, and that she was a creature of mimicry who would weave their night into being. Whoever she was a witch, and knew well the cold sorceries. She would then become Ranni's secret mentor, far away from the eyes of her mother, far away from the light of the full moon. The snowy crone taught the young Ranni many things. She taught her the history and meanings of all the statues in their castles and their churches, why they were built where they were, and what they hid underneath. She taught her the full history of Caria, and how far back her bloodline truly went, the truth of her mother, and the truth of her father. She spoke of the beginning, the seduction and the betrayal, the affair from which gold arose, and so too the role of her shadow. She spoke of the princess's fate, and the lengths she would have to go to achieve it. But of all of the things she taught young Ranni, she taught her to fear the dark moon. and on a night of wintry fog, Rennala would prepare a treasure chest passed down to Carian princesses. The rune of death would be stolen. She would place in the chest a ring depicting a leaden full moon, symbolic of a cold oath, and the demigods would begin to fall. The ring was supposed to be given by Lunar Princess Ranni to her consort, starting with Godwyn the Golden, and ending with Rennala's little dark moon. The Night of the Black Knives would come to a close when the full moon witch had waned, when the stars of her night sky lost their way, with the beginning of a morning that would never cease. Her little dark moon was gone, once again, never to return.
Sadly, her heart was broken when Lord Radagon left her.
Radagon would steal away the pieces of his wife's shattered heart.
And moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord?
For bonds with sprites were made to be broken, and of all the sprites, fire sprites are said to be the most boisterous in nature.
In the end, Lady Rennala was left alone, cradling the amber egg Lord Radagon bequeathed her. Now she devotes herself to it through forbidden rite, the grim art of reincarnation. You would do well to remember, severing a vow, strongest of bonds, has consequences ever more dire.
Rennala would nestle up close to her amber egg and birth Sweetings anew, in hopes of recreating what she had lost, as she had done once before. Yet the rebirths were not without imperfections, and thus she would repeat the process, eventually becoming utterly dependent on it. Rebirth was as sleep to her. With each awakening, Rennala's memory faded into oblivion, until she forgot all about her little dark moon. And the wheel of time keeps turning, just to come back round again. All the while, below the earth, the Nox continued to plot under a false night sky, in eternal anticipation of their liege lord, of the coming age of stars, and their lord of night. Yet, in a time long past, when the eternal city sat below the true night sky, and the only thing above it was the heavens, two moons hung low. One was full and bright, reflecting the sun's light. The other was black and beguiling, and able to create life. For those who were long-lived and seldom born were nothing if not patient and knowledgeable, and could create great wonders. With the immense power of their stone tools made in the lands of their home, outside the lands between, the power over life and reality was theirs. They created colossal stone coffins, and on rays of light, they drifted to what is now known as the Cerulean coast. Grave glovewort was found towards the bow of the coffins, as if the heroic spirits comforted by the flowers were guiding the coffins to this place, to the lands between. The history of their people was carved as reliefs on the sides of these immense ships. It showed the power of the crucible, of men turning into beasts. It showed the horned beast who could dance across the sky, the wise man of the ancient dynasty, before Uld or Ul were founded, two figures standing in front of some gate, and the serpent writhing around the whole of it. Found inside the coffins, though, was the secret to the Numen's power. It was a liquid, formless as it was. Some might even consider it to be the mother of crucibles. Though it came from those who were seen as impure, when it congealed into viscous lumps, it could be used for great things. The bruised color putrescence that oozes from the stone coffins was a product of rot and putrefaction, but that was its secret. Its power was enhanced by the rotting. The coffins were as giant fermenting jars, for when the Eternal's congealed putrescence ran low, and the large viscous lumps which remained of the impure lives kept within the stone coffins began to vanish, the source of their claymen began to run dry. The Numens of the ancient dynasty had to devise a new solution. They would look back towards the skies from which they came, for all began as stardust, all born of a great rupture far across the skies. Once upon a time, the stars of the night sky guided fate, and the eternal city's black moon of Nokstella would be their guide, a black and beguiling thing, almost polished like a black mirror. It was a moon made by man. Through the power of the black moon, the Eternals could capture what remained of passing flashes of starlight, ephemeral slivers that gave off a pale blue glow. These starlight shards were prized in the Eternal City and were used as the primary ingredient in intoxicating drafts. One would be a bluish-black tonic, used in the creation of puppets, the act of enslaving the soul of another for all of eternity. The other would be the creation of celestial dew, also known as a hidden night tear. With the primordial drop of dew, they would be able to recreate life, or at least something akin to it. This would lead to the creation of the formless life forms known as silver tears. The silver tear makes mockery of life, reborn again and again into imitation. The first thing the Eternals would attempt to imitate would be that of the bruise-colored putrescence, that which remained of the impure lives kept within the stone coffins. During this long-past age, death was burned by ghost flame. Even the remains of tainted flesh were given equal treatment in death. For without the burning of these cold flames, the putrescence would continue to writhe and wriggle. Its impurity would live on in the face of all else. But thanks to the moon of Nokstella, it could be imitated by a silver tear, and it could be molded into anything. It could be molded into new life. They would shed a hardened husk, and to most, it would look the same as the congealed putrescence. Its mimicry was known to trick even the wisest of men and the keenest of eyes. They would be able to duplicate food, such as herba and mushrooms, and their people would go without hunger. The silver tear mimic was what it was, and then it would just be. They could thoroughly temper the liquid metal of the silver tear until it hardened, creating grim shotels that could rip a man's flesh or shoot out like a deadly needle. Their cities went from stacked stones to polished marble. Their empires could rise and fall, but what they created would remain eternal. Their greatest achievement of all, though, was the people that they made. They did not just have the power to control a man's fate through puppetry, but they could create a man whole cloth and weave his fate in its entirety. With the power of the black moon of Nokstella, they could become as gods and make man in their own image. Their silver tears would be known as mimic tears, and it would take the form of whoever summoned them. But its mimicry did not extend to imitating the summoner's will, for it could not mimic a soul. They could only mimic the same eternal vessel. So the Newmans of the Eternal City would turn to their old practice of cultivating glovewort to assist in the act of spirit tuning. Spirit tuning was not just the simple act of imbuing life into a mimic tear. It was an art that lied somewhere between tuning an instrument and conducting a conversation, leaving both parties enriched. The bulbs of the white flowers that bloomed were each a soundless bell used to summon spirits. But during this time, spirit tuning was no worse than puppetry. The silver tear made mockery of their lives, and the spirits would be reborn again and again into imitation. Eventually, the spirits would nestle into their homes and make them a permanent residence. Thus did the copies pass into becoming the genuine article. No longer were they just mimics. They were people all their own. They were born of the moon and the stars. They were born of the night. They were the Nox, a cold-blooded race who could adapt to any environment, and their time would come. Long ago, the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will, and were banished deep underground. This is one theory to how they invoked that ire, and why they live under a false night sky. In mirror helms fashioned from crystal looking glass, they would hide their ever-changing faces to ward off the intervention of the Greater Will and its vassal fingers. They would devise a plan that would break their chains and set them free, by killing the masters and taking away their night sky. Through dark rites and forbidden sorcery, they would create a space of darkness that drew in all light, a portal into eternal darkness. And through that darkness came a malformed star born in a lightless void far away, a falling star of ill omen. It would be the despair that would bring about the Eternal City's ruin. The sun was set, and only the moons could be seen in the sky, overlapping, as though nestled against one another. One was full and bright, reflecting the sun's light. The other was black and beguiling, and able to create life. The city was loud, as any city should be. People in the parks, laughing and playing. People in their homes, hosting friends and families. People in the markets, buying and selling. Then came a terrible screech across the sky, and the black moon crumbled into fragments that pelted the earth. The city went up into flames. Whole families burnt to death. Many were calling and looking for their children and their families, but the fire was everywhere. Everywhere there was fire. Fragments of the moon pelted the city and pushed people back into the burning buildings they were trying to escape from. One account claimed that the moon itself had come tumbling down, until the earth opened wide, and all that remained of the Eternal City was silence. Even its name would be lost to time. All that is left of the once great and eternal city of the Newmans is white, murky water tainted by corpse wax, collapsed, rotting buildings which hold nothing but lost memories, and engorged ants who feast on the ruins imbibed with the crucible of life. The moon of Noxtella was lost, scattered to the wind, and the moon that was full and bright, enchanting and bewitching, was alone. It was merely the closest of the celestial bodies, and nothing more, until those born of silver established themselves in the mountaintops that nearly touched the sky. The silver tear makes mockery of life, reborn again and again into imitation, and the black moon would be born again, as the younger, darker sister of the full moon. The twin moons would wait in the sky, overlapping, as though nestled against one another. The Nox would wait for their coming age of stars, and their lord of night. And the wheel of time keeps turning, just to come back round again.
He told me the moon was an egg, Khaleesi, the Lysingal said. Once, there were 2 moons in the sky, but one wandered too close to the sun and cracked from the heat. 1,000 dragons poured forth and drank the fire of the sun, and that is why dragons breathe flame.
One day, the other moon will kiss the sun too, and then it will crack, and the dragons will return. I hope you enjoyed that story. I am the royal preceptor of Caria, of history and lore, Jacobus Mimicus. Before we continue, I want to give a special thanks to the 2 who lended me their voices in the making of this lesson. Carian Knight, AHumanJusticar, and Khaleesi, Kate the Kind. Without their assistance, we would not have such excellent storytelling on display today. Now, you may be wondering how I can know these things. What gives me the right to tell the tale of history? Well, our understanding of history is incomplete. History is really just the stories we tell ourselves to try and understand the past, and so we don't make the same mistakes that our forebears have made. For instance, we looked at the parallels between the 2 moons, the loss and the recreation that happens again and again as the wheel of time keeps turning. You may not believe me. You may ask, how could I know such things? How could I speak with such confidence? I'll tell you a little secret. Like every sorcerer, I have my own memory stone, a fragment of the moon of Noxtella itself. I have it right here. You can see, it's black and beguiling. And with one simple flick, we could see the world from the perspective of the black moon. So if you liked anything that I shared today, or you subscribed to anything that I taught you, please consider coming back for the next lesson. We will be delving deep into the Nox conspiracy, the history of Marika the Eternal, and what the end of the Lands Between looks like. But who's to say? I'm not really a preceptor. I'm only mimicking one. Just like you and I aren't talking right now. I'm looking in the lens of a camera, mimicking eye contact, in front of a green screen, mimicking a library. It all mimics, all the way down. Won't you join us?
Like the circles that you find in the windmill.